Welcome to Finally Talking Podcast. Today, I have an interview with Ann Werner, author of The Melt and several other books. I have a link to the website here for her below, and also a link to Amazon for the book that she just published this past summer. It was finished in 2019, and let's just say it's a very prescient book to read. So without further ado, I introduce to you Ann Werner. Ann, thanks for coming in today. Appreciate you talking to me over the phone about the book that you just released.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. One of the things I like about doing this podcast is that I get to talk to the people that I want to talk to. And, sometimes I get people that know I read a lot, and they'll ask me to read a book of theirs. And if I don't like the book, I have to kind of sugarcoat it, But this thing, this thing moves pretty fast. I was really pleased to read it and glad that I had a good time reading it.
Well, I'm glad you did too.
Oh. I guess that's
why
the goal.
I wrote it. I wanted to entertain people.
Well, it does that. It certainly does. Just one of the things I think of about something like this is that we get a lot of these books, apocalyptic books. I happen to read a bunch of those. I grew up across the street from a science fiction writer in the 50s and 60s, 70s. His guy's name was Gordon Dixon. And his apocalyptic stuff did what so many of them do. And they opened the first page with, there's already cars burning, skyscrapers falling, cats chasing dogs, and everybody's trying to get through the environment.
Yes.
One of the unique things I liked about this book really was that it really sets us up. In book one, especially, the book is divided into two sections. And the first section does something unique in these types of books that I think makes it really, really cool and really different. And that is, it sets us up for this, how society is actually responding to this thing that starts taking over the world, and how the human element of the family relationships and the dynamics of the people involved, how they're being affected specifically. So, that's what I was aiming for, because so many of these post-apocalyptic tales are of the Mad Max variety, and I just did not envision. I sat down and I thought about it, and I thought, well, you get rid of I got rid of 95% of humanity in this book, and. But I'm thinking that, people, just for simple things, okay, riding around in monster trucks, after a while, where are they going to get the fuel? Where are they going to get the gasoline? Because if society breaks down, you don't have any electrical power. Gas pumps work on electrical power. And even if you're able to go to a gas station and open up those underground storage tanks and siphon it, sooner or later, you are going to run out of fuel. I've always been that way. I have been a reader. The most exciting thing in my life was when I learned how to read. I love books, and I have a tendency to pick things apart. So I pick apart my own writing, and I think, well, does this make sense? What would people do in this situation? How would they do this? How would they do that? And that's kind of the process. So I went through it in writing this book, just like, societal ills don't disappear because most of society disappears. The remaining people still have their beliefs, and, they still have their views about what's right and wrong. And I think in a situation like that, people would be more prone to help. We see that all the time in disaster situations. Yeah, pockets of goodness.
Because people band together, but still, they're still going to carry certain things with them. It's just human nature. And so that's what I try to do in the book.
Yeah, that comes through really well. It led to one of the things I thought about early with it. First of all, I love to read as well, and I grew up reading a lot. And I'm finding as I get older that my concentration level on taking on a 3,000-page book has, kind of diminished. So, and secondly, I read books, and for me, I see them as movies. All right, I'm sitting in a theater watching a movie. And why this book worked for me is because I see myself sitting there watching this movie. And to your point,
Did you do a lot of? It seems like, and that just goes to what you just said. It looks like you did a lot of what if thought experiments, and kind of maybe wrote down what you thought as you say, picked them apart to see how people would respond to this thing.
Yeah. And, and also a thing that I find extremely helpful, especially because I'm an independent writer, so I can't depend on a big publishing company, and a bunch of editors and all that sort of thing. I belong to a writing group, and because I do have a tendency to procrastinate. Actually, I think for me, okay, they started a what they call a long form fiction group. So initially, when I joined this group, people would bring in maybe something short, maybe 5,000 words.
Right.
Okay, which doesn't take very long, and we would have a 2-hour meeting, and there would be 3 critiques, and so I would bring in a little bit at a time, but then. I guess one of the group leaders, he said, a lot of people here are working on full-length novels, so why don't we do a long form? So that way I could bring in 3 chapters at a time, which is about, it usually on a double space, regular 8 by 11 page, comes out to, anywhere between 40 and 50 pages. So it's a lot, but we give people 2 weeks notice and put it up on the Google Docs board that we have. And then I get all kinds of feedback. And it's just invaluable because some of the things in my book, are a direct result of listening to the feedback of these people. Like one of the characters in the book, the Arthur Bennett, the guy that they found on the road with the kid. Yeah. That was, I wanted to make him kind of ambiguous. At first, is he straight? Is he gay? Is he this? Is he that? And I got that idea from somebody in my writers group. And so they really were invaluable for helping me, come up with a few different angles that I hadn't thought of. But, I started this book in November of 2016. I had no idea we were going to have a global pandemic.
November of 2016 was my idea of the beginning of any apocalypse by most people's standard of measurement.
Yeah, well, you're not alone in that.
I find that to be the case. Not a big fan. Okay, I'll just say it straight up.
Neither am I.
Yeah, I don't. It's. I'll tell you what. Here in Minneapolis, now I've traveled a lot. I did want to get into this a little bit with you about your background. On your bio, I noticed you moved to Southern California in the '70s. But I've known about Trump for years. Okay, but there's so many people here in this town that kind of think, well, yeah. I mean, didn't you watch The Apprentice? This guy's completely successful. It's like, oh my God, are you serious?
I know they bought the whole thing. I mean, he was. That saved him. That show saved him because he was in big financial trouble at the time. And, and people got, I remember Donald Trump when, he and I are of a certain age. And, I remember hearing about him and I thought, and, here I am, I'm living in LA, okay, right. Which can really be the capital of smarmy. Right. It really can be. Okay, I had the time of my life and I would do it all over again. I would just, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would do it all over again. Because I had such great experiences and I met such great people. But, there really are a lot of very toxic people in that town. Yeah. And I looked at him and I just thought, oh, God, I wouldn't have touched that man with a 10-foot pole. I thought he was disgusting. Yeah. Just disgusting. And I was right.
No, he is. And he's blasted through all these levels of depravity over the years that just when you think it's not going to get worse, it just does. Right?
It's worse. I know. Yeah, I know. He can find new lows.
One of the things that just goes, I think I'm hopping around here, but it makes me think about questions and things to talk about as we're talking. Like, one of the things I'd say is my only criticism for the book, and you'll see this is good-natured, is that you don't have an entire chapter devoted to the president getting sick from coronavirus and dying a long, torturous, suffering, painful death.
Trust me, I did. I did think of it, but I mean, he was a footnote really to the story. I mean, and it was, I mean, I did a tongue in cheek because my president is President Tower.
Yes.
But what I tell you, what really surprised me was, like I said, I had no idea that we were headed for a pandemic. But I guess it just goes to the fact that I knew what kind of person Donald Trump was. Long before a lot of people in this country found out. And so all that stuff that I wrote, none of that was put in after I knew. I was finished this book in December of 2019. I had finished it.
Right.
Then all I had to do was polish it. And the only additions that I made were very, very small. Certain terms when they were discussing the virus, the Red Scourge in my book.
Right.
Talking about airborne. And so, because one night I was watching the news and there was somebody on the news and they were talking about the difference between just a regular flu virus with the droplets and then another an airborne thing that can hang in these tiny little things for hours. And so I made mine even more lethal than that. Spores that you just shed. You don't have to breathe them.
Yes.
But I mean, the response in the book, what did not completely mirror Trump's response, but it was very indicative of how he would meet it.
Right.
And I didn't change that from my original version because, he was the whole thing about, lying about a vaccine.
Yes.
And attacking governors that he didn't like, all that sort of thing. And, I just knew what he was going to do. I knew what he would do.
Yeah, that comes through a lot.
Damn if he didn't do it.
Yeah. He never doesn't fail to disappoint. I'll say that. Yeah, in one of the press conferences, and he's a minor player in the whole scheme of things. But when you display one of the scenes of a scenes like a movie again,
I think that's because my background as an actor.
It is. Yeah. Well, this thing does read like a script. Honestly, I really enjoyed that about it. I didn't get bogged down at all. But I was going to say that, and I think one of the press conferences where you've got Anthony Carmichael, which whether it was intentional or not, I thought of Fauci right away. But and then President Tower. Yeah, that press conference mirrored a lot of those like March, April things that he was doing.
Exactly. And so when he was doing it, I'm thinking, God, I must be psychic. Which, really, truly, I think everybody has a little psychic in them.
I think
one of my main characters, Rena, she obviously has a little bit of psychic, and that's going to be expanded upon.
Yeah.
And so this isn't the first time stuff like this has happened to me when I write a book.
Really?
I wrote a little different. Okay, one of my other titles, it's called Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And it's about a satanic serial killer.
Wow.
Which was really fun to write. Yeah.
That's got to be
working out your aggressions.
Yeah, real meditative,
on the
right?
page. Yeah, and so I guess I get about I don't know, 3/4 of the way through writing it, and then it struck me. I thought, I really ought to see how a real serial killer would think. Because I have my serial killer thinking in a certain way.
Right.
And so I went to this used bookstore that was up the street from my place, and I got a book about the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't really know anything. I knew the name Zodiac Killer.
Right.
But that's all I knew. But I had no idea about anything else, just that he killed a lot of people,
right,
and they never caught him. And so I was looking at what the Zodiac had done. He had written newspapers all the time. I didn't know that. My killer did it. My killer did all sorts of things that the Zodiac did, which, of course, then I'm thinking, my God, this lives inside of me.
Yes, you are a Wiccan, right?
So it's, I just, and I've had some experiences in my life, but that's one of the things that I think most people have a little bit of psychic in, and I think it's just something that's been lost because of all the technology that we have that interferes with it.
Well, that's true, and I do believe that successful creative people are the ones who can tap into that zeitgeist, that spirit of the time, and kind of be in tune and grab it from the ether, bring it in, and flush it out, and then the rest of us can enjoy that kind of thing, that work that's produced.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah,
but,
I think that's that. Well, it really shows how you tapped into this thing. Now, look, you moved from Baltimore, your hometown, to California in 1977, Southern California specifically.
Yep, I was there. From 77 till 2003.
Okay, so you got there.
I went to Arizona, and then I went to Northern California. I'm a traveling kind of woman.
Boy, you were Take It Easy, the song right there. That was during the Hotel California era, so there's all kinds of things. Just that alone would make up a podcast episode with you, because I'd like to hear that. I came at it from a teenager. When we traveled to Los Angeles in the 70s, I remember Tower Records had a billboard up for Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, and how different that was from the Elton John that I had gotten to know at that time. But we're talking about Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, all those guys. You were kind of in those circles over there?
No, not really. I didn't go to California to be an actor or anything. I just went to California. I just got in. I was bored.
Yes.
I was bored, and I was just talking to my daughter about it today, and it was in the wintertime, and it was right around my birthday. It was my 29th birthday, I think. My 29th birthday, and I had a roommate, and her name was Phyllis, and we're sitting there, and we're smoking a doob.
Yep.
And I said, I got a great idea. And she said, what? And I said, let's go to California. Let's go to LA. Because I've been thinking I wanted to leave Baltimore because I had, been there, done that, and just all this stuff, that had happened. And it was cold, and I was sick and tired of battling snow and shoveling snow, and which you really don't have to do much of that anymore. But,
thanks to the melt.
So I had this plan, and I said, all right, this is what we're going to do. And she said, okay. And I said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pay off all of our bills, and we're going to, save up money so we'll have money when we get there, so we can, at least stay in a place, have a place to sleep, until we find a place to live and get jobs and blah, blah, blah. And I meant it. And so I hung a calendar on the wall, and I started crossing the days off. Now, she never did it. I kept saying, are you saving up your money? Oh, yeah, okay. And I knew she was lying to me.
Right.
But I meant it. Yeah. And, boy, I'm telling you, and my target date was July 1st of 77. And so I made the decision on March 24th in 76. And I did it because I wanted to. And then when I just wanted a change of scenery, and I did all sorts of things when I was there I got there in July, and it was a part-time job answering fan mail for William Shatner.
Really? William Shatner?
Yeah, William Shatner, which was great because I'm a Star Trek freak.
Yeah,
and
who isn't?
But I only got to meet him once. I mean, I was just, I was answering fan mail for him and signing his name, and people, people were sending him Afghans and cookies and whatever.
Was he?
But but I did a lot of stuff, I did a lot of stuff before I got into acting. I didn't get into acting until the 90s.
Really? And I see you were on, is that Days of Our Lives? What was that?
Yeah, I was on Days of Our Lives for 7.5 years.
Yeah.
Just under 7.5 years, yeah. Well, but it wasn't a big part, but it was fun. It was fun, and it was, and I did a movie that never got released. And it kind of pissed me off because I had a good part in this movie, but it just never got. Yeah, it just never got released. But, there's some cool people in it. There was...
That's neat.
What's the usual? Karen Black was in it.
Really? Karen Black?
Yeah, she was in it.
Trilogy of Terror, Karen Black, with the mummy, the little doll thing, the voodoo dolls, where I remember her from.
Yeah, and she... and who else was in it? Russ Tamblyn, who was in West Side Story.
Yep.
I think he... Yeah, and then Lawrence Tierney, who was in... I can never remember the name of that movie. But it had Mr. Pink, Mr. Green, Mr. Yellow, and it was that scene that I cannot watch with Michael Madsen dancing around the guy in a chair while he lops off the guy's ear. I couldn't watch that.
Stuck in the Middle with You, Jerry Rafferty, Steelers Wheel, right? That one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so Lawrence Tierney was in it. Yeah, and it was a strange kind of movie. Yeah. Yeah, but it never got released.
So that's pretty neat, I will say.
Yeah. Like I say, time of my life.
I bet it was. I moved to California in the 80s. I went to Northern California and lived in the Haight-Ashbury, and grew up in Minneapolis and really loved it out there. And I think I like the same things as you did, the climate and also just in terms of going there. I had set up a whole posse of people. We were all going to go there. I did almost the same thing, just said, you know what, the hell with it, let's go. And then when it came to D-Day, they all kind of had dropped along the sidelines and didn't want to make that move. So I ended out there just by myself starting up there. But I really enjoyed California. I must say I really did.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what really got me was so many people would say to me, what are you going to do when you get there?
I know,
and I went, well, like I'm going to get a job. I'm going to find a place to live. It's not like I'm jumping off planet Earth. And I think some people are just afraid of making that big of a change. And I drove across country by myself. I left my daughter with my mom for 3 months. And, when school started, then, she flew out with our cat.
Perfect.
And, and just and got my life started. And
well, you have to do that. The kindred spirit, speaks loudly to us. I know that you just have to go out there and do it. And you do have to just say, okay, I could sit here and plan this out for the next 10 years of my life, or fill the tank of gas and make a move, right?
Yeah.
So, I get that.
I know. It's true, because I asked my mom about it. And my mother just told me, I said, I don't know if I'm making the right decision because my former husband, he was, I didn't tell him till 2 weeks before I was going to leave because I did not want to get into that. And I'm thinking, am I doing the right thing? And my mother just looked at me, and my mother was nothing like me. Okay. She's nothing like me. My mother is a very kind of a retiring sort of soft-spoken woman and all that. And she just looked at me. She goes, Ann, if you don't go, you'll spend the rest of your life thinking, what if I'd gone? She goes, if you don't like it, you can always come back.
Yeah, but do it.
And I thought, that's why I talk to you, Mom, because you're wise. Yeah. And she was, she was right. And she never, ever steered me wrong. But yeah, she was not like me because one time she was talking about, she grew up very, very poor.
Right.
She's a first generation American. Her parents were from Lithuania, and she used to go. She didn't realize it at the time, but it was during the Depression, and the kids in the summertime, they sent them out to what was called fresh air farms, where they would go out and pick berries and fruit and stuff like that. I mean, it was a job, actually. It was like a work. But for her, it was like a vacation because she lived in a tenement in the city, and now she's out in the country. At the fresh air farm, all right, all the kids one night, they got together, going to have a big party. And she goes, yeah, they're all running amok. She goes, and I just locked myself in my room. I said, see, Mom? And she goes in there, and they're pounding on the door. And I said, that's the difference between you and me. I would have been one of the kids pounding on the door. Come on, Mary, let's play.
You do seem very spirited, I'll say that. So I can see
well,
that.
I am.
Stick of dynamite is what I call my wife at times with that. It's a compliment.
Okay.
Now getting into the book, again, like I said earlier, it's 2 parts. We get a unique perspective on how society breaks down. But one of the things I like about it the most is that you do that, like you do broad strokes for what's happening, and then you give us these little human vignettes. Specifically Ethan and Rena are the main protagonists, I would say, throughout the book. And you get their little, what's it like to be, well, I know this now, but I wouldn't have known it in 2019. What's it like to be cooped up with your family, for an extended period of time? I mean, we're lucky to be alive at my house. And so you explore that, and that's one of the strengths of the books is that I know that there's a pandemic going on throughout this book, obviously, but I also know that you're showing the stressors that come on people in their little daily lives and how they try to diffuse that tension with humor. And that is another strength of the book is that you have this, literal apocalypse going on. But, if we go back to a movie like Jaws, a movie, right? But if we go back to that movie, what I remember about it, very serious stuff, very scary thriller, but you always have these little tension breakers every few minutes. And I think when movies have that tension breaker, and you have a lot of those sprinkled throughout this book, where they're facing hell, but they manage to still have that little interaction between each other as a couple that really kind of gives it some dose of reality, because then we can kind of relate to it. I'll never be, well, I hope I'm never in front of a burning skyscraper, but you never know. I know that I'll be communicating and interacting with my wife, and down to the point where the whole in this book, you have this sequence, or you allude to it a couple times, where the wealth of knowledge that we've all got is no longer relied upon from our phones or our laptop devices. It's really going to be going to that thing they call the library, and civilization rises or falls on its knowledge of the Dewey Decimal System, right? Yeah, and I like that.
I thought about the people in my book. They really have some advantages, because they do have access to all this knowledge, and they do have access to solar panels that they can scavenge.
Right.
So they're not completely just left hanging out, twisting in the wind.
Right.
And I think that, people in that situation, I was just trying to think of what people would do in that situation. When I first started writing the book, and I tweeted about it or talked about it on Facebook, I can't remember. But anyway, somebody had contacted me and said, "Oh, you ought to read this book. It's called Earth Abides." And I guess Earth Abides, it was written, I think it was written like in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was set in San Francisco. And what it was basically the same thing as my book, all right? I mean, this plague just comes, and it starts with a guy, he wakes up and he's been snake bit, but somehow he survives it, and then somebody's knocking on the door of the cabin where or opens the door. They don't knock on the door. They open the door of the cabin, they see him, and he's lying in this bed because he's been so ill from the snake bite, and they freak out and they run away, and he has no idea what has happened. Okay, but then, and which I thought was a really interesting premise, and then when he emerges, he finds out that most of humanity is gone. The thing that kind of, it was like, wow, the people in his book, the only thing that they did was they found empty houses and then took up residence, and then went and 20 years later, they're still eating the canned goods that they found on the shelves. And I thought, well, I don't think that's how people would act. I mean, people would, because you know yourself, you see it all the time on the news, a big tornado, a flood. You've got these people out there, as soon as they can get out there, and they're starting to clean up, and they're starting to do this. And I thought, people are going to, they're going to raid what's left on supermarket shelves, but I'll be damned if I eat canned goods after 20 years.
That pushes the palatability
envelope,
of them.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 years is one thing.
Yeah. I mean, you could freaking kill yourself doing that. And it's like, I don't think people would just lie around
waiting
and,
the canned goods
and just wait to die or something. I think people would begin the process of rebuilding.
Yes.
And I think that people would try to build back something better.
Well, right. Look at what's happening with the pandemic. We've got an explosion of home gardening, right? So there'd be that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I live about a half a mile away from the protests that occurred here in Minneapolis, and so we saw and we participated in the cleanup the next morning and the next mornings, and you do see that.
Yeah.
It's like you got this thing, and right to your point, you don't just sit there and say, "Well, let's have some more mandarin oranges in a can." I mean, they don't wait for that. They're growing their own beans. They're raising their own chickens, right? Like, I mean, you're hunting for your turkey. That's kind of what, and that's how the book, really does better than some of these other books that just give you these broad strokes of, where they're just kind of passive players and they raid a store. I mean, your book does talk about that, though. They raid pharmacies and they raid wine stores because they want a good bottle. And I could see myself doing that realistically. And what I liked in one of those scenes is that how you have taken the time to describe how they have to clean out the driveway just to get the car out because there's been all this garbage while they've been in lockdown for a few months. Yeah, so I find that brilliant.
Well, thank you very much. I love being called brilliant.
Yeah. Flattery will get you everywhere.
That's right.
That's right. So just leading into this, The Melt, it's obvious to me what the premise is, but why don't you just talk about a little bit about The Melt, its reference, and the Red Scourge and how this thing unfolds?
Well, I actually initially got the idea
to write them out because I used to write for an online publication called Liberals Unite.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to, I liked writing about climate. Nobody ever wanted to read those articles because I guess nobody wanted to think about it. But one of the articles I had written was about a team of French scientists, and I guess they were up in Siberia, which is close. It's right in near the Mongolian steppe where the beginning of my book is set. And they discovered these ancient viruses when they were doing core samples. Now, it wasn't the first time either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, stuff like that is out there.
Yep.
And that's where I kind of got the inspiration for the book. And I'll be honest with you, I have no freaking idea where I came up with the reindeer herders because I never even knew there were such. I didn't know that there were reindeer herders, but there are.
Right, I only see them with Santa Claus, right? I mean, I don't think about an actual
but there
village.
really are the Duca, and and so I looked them up, and I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Half the time I don't even remember how I get to a beginning of a story after it's written. It's just there, and I think, wow, I'm glad I found that, and so. I mean, that's really how it started. And so then, you're thinking, okay, well, then what do I do next after this? And, so that's what I do. I just take it one step at a time. And I'd read a book by Stephen King, one of my very faves.
Yes.
Called On Writing that he had written after he was almost killed.
Oh.
What really was gratifying to me was he talked about his process. And his process he does an outline. I can't do an outline. He just begins with a what if proposition. And that's how I write. So for me, it was like, okay, what if this happened? Then what would happen? Mm-hmm. So I knew that they had solar panels, that the Duca had solar panels from the Totem Peoples Project. So that it powered their way to communicate with the outside world. And so they would call somebody when they discovered the body, and then I knew, since it was a melting permafrost, that they'd send in a scientific, so it was just one step after another, and then, I had never heard of USAMRIID, the U.S. Army Medical Research, of Infectious Diseases Center. I'd never heard of any of those, all right? But that's, it's just, you go, that's what I do. I just one after another, this step, that step, this step, that step. So then you have that there, and then you want to personalize the story. So that's when I came up with Ethan and Rena, because they're just la la la.
Yes.
We're starting our family. We're buying our home.
Love
Everything's wonderful.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden everything blows up. Yeah. And so it's just, then you just figure, okay, everything's blown up. What are you going to do now? But you've got this bomb shelter, so you're going to use it.
Right.
So it's just, writing to me is just, it's fun. All right. It's really hard sometimes, but it's really fun. And I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, and I have little pads and pens all over the house.
Okay.
And they're everywhere. Okay. And I'll wake up and I'll think, oh, this has to go in. And I just write it down. So I have like thousands of notes all over my house for things that I want to do. And some that some I use and some I discard, for the book, but I never discard anything, because everything is the kernel of an idea that maybe if I'm not going to use it now, I'll use it later or in a different book altogether.
Yeah, that's an interesting process. I think that, we have to learn that's when that stuff comes, right? It doesn't come necessarily when you're wanting it to, like in the coffee shop at 10 in the morning, but it's coming to you. You wake up, it's 2 in the morning. It's the most inconvenient time of your, day. And suddenly you get this thing that goes, God, that would work really well. And should I stay up and write it, or should I just go back to bed and hopefully I'll remember it in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I used to get up and actually go and do the writing. Mm-hmm. But now I live in a 3-story house, and my bedroom is on the 3rd floor, and my office is on the 1st floor.
Oh,
so
yeah. Forget it.
So I just make, especially now because, I'm just having some issues. When I go to the grocery store, I don't, Yeah,
so the book does all this little minutia of the personal stories. And then the first part closes out with most of civilization getting wiped out, but we don't necessarily see all that. We know what's going on. I'm informed as a reader from what's happening around me, so I can fill in some of those blanks. And I like how you roll it out from this event has occurred that we've frankly read about. I've read about stuff like viruses and stuff coming through from the permafrost melt. I think there was a book called The Hot Zone that took place out in Reston, Virginia. It was a real story about a virus that got a level 4 or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking of that. I'm filling in some of those blanks, and you bring it to Europe, and then you bring it back to the United States, the press conferences, and finally into their house, and how they have to make decisions about his band members and friends and those things, and how that has repercussions throughout the book. So in book 2, you have that first phase wipeout. Book 2 is having them trying to find a place to live. The nuclear power plant exploded, so they probably want to get away from that water and move a little bit further away. And if you don't mind me saying, they moved to a town called New Hope. Yeah. And
New Hope.
And is there a New Hope out where you live? A real city?
I think there's a New Hope somewhere in Pennsylvania, but I'm not quite sure. Mm-hmm. I just came up with the name New Hope because I figured, that's what people.
That's what I would call it.
Who have just survived something like that, because it's actually Harper's Ferry where they went.
Oh, okay.
But it was Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. But they rechristened it New Hope because it was a new beginning.
Sure.
And and I don't live all that far from Harper's Ferry, and I just went over there, and I hadn't been there for years and years and years. When I lived in Baltimore, I used to, every once in a while we'd go over to Harper's Ferry because it's really kind of a cool place.
Right.
And the whole place, it's actually, well, not the whole place, but like downtown Harper's Ferry is actually, it's a national park.
It is.
It's run by the park. Yeah, it's run by the Park Service.
Now,
and then there are homes and everything around there.
Right.
But so I thought, this would be, and there were lots of places there, and I thought, this would be kind of a cool, because it's really pretty. It's on the Shenandoah. I think the Shenandoah and the Potomac and all these rivers. They kind of, it's like a confluence and everything. So it's a beautiful place. But you would not, you wouldn't. And I even make mention in the second half of the book about the Shenandoah. It's very polluted.
Right.
You would not want to go swimming in it, and it's because of all the animal runoff. Which again, it's something I'm going to be addressing in subsequent things, because it's like, how long would it take for the planet to renew itself? Because I do in the second half of the book when they go in to Frederick and they go to the library, and as they're going along, you can see the grass coming up in the roads, and then the ivy started to cover buildings and hawks' nests on top of stores in like the downtown Frederick area, and because the earth would reclaim. It's going to reclaim, whatever is left over. So I really just tried to. I put my imagination to work, I guess.
Well, did you ever? One of the things I remember from my childhood is when Mount St. Helens erupted, and then it was just a moonscape, and then National Geographic went back there about a year later and filmed it. And they'd show these little flowers popping up all over that and little things like that. And then they went out every few years and you'd see it be reclaimed. There's also a show on National Geographic Television that's something like A World Without Us. Have you ever seen those of what happens a day after the world ended and people disappear?
Oh, right. Yeah, and they go and they show you what happens a year later, 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really, well, I can remember there was a movie out, and this was back in the 70s. It was called Logan's Run.
Oh, God, I remember that, yes.
Yeah, and when they escaped from that world, and went and they saw, and everything, like Washington D.C. and everything was all covered in vines, and because that's what would happen. I mean, I can look out right now in my backyard, and there's ivy that's just climbing up, and I haven't ripped it down, and if I don't rip it down, it'll just keep on climbing up on the fence around my backyard. It'll go over onto my shed. That's what happens.
So that brings that's an interesting point that you say that, because I remember a while back I read an article about what if archaeologists were to come on the modern home, and what would they interpret it as? And so they'd see this giant screen and all these chairs aligned facing it. They'd say, well, these people were religious because they worshiped this entity, either through, like an obelisk, like 2001, right? A flat screen TV, and all the chairs are pointing towards it. So there's this gathering room where this society had its members go to in some kind of a uniform religious experience. You know what I mean? So that it kind of, that's the level of detail that I like that you have in the book. Not that specific example, but the fact that you're taking the time to care about how these things would start to play out. I love it. I love it. Now in book 2, there's an antagonist that appears, and he's gonna, I'm assuming, drive a lot going forward, perhaps, if he makes it. But I'm assuming you're on to your second book of this series, After the Apocalypse.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Would it be?
I still have to come up with a title to it. I don't know. I guess it'll reveal itself to me as I go along. But I've started it, and it's and like I say, I have all these thousands of notes, and I've written some stuff, and then I'm going, oh, I don't know if it's going to fit here, and so I've slotted that into a different little folder and everything. But I've got a few chapters of it written, and I have to take it into my writing group in December. So
I see. There we go. Let him have at it. A secure person would allow for that criticism. I don't know if I could handle that. I'd be like, what do you mean you don't like it? Well, obviously you're misunderstanding. I've been in these writing groups too, where, I'm getting eviscerated or something like that.
Yeah.
Or they think theirs is great and it's actually not, and you have to kind of work around their feelings a little bit. It's like, no, not that I don't like it.
But but you can always, the thing that I really like about my group, because you're right, I know one of the people in my group was saying that he had been, I guess, taking a writing class, and he said, God, the people in there were brutal, and they were nasty and mean.
Yeah, there's not constructive criticism. It was criticism. Yeah.
And nobody in my group is like that.
That's great.
Nobody. Okay, and because I know I just finished a critique, we met virtually this past Sunday, and it's like a fantasy story, and fantasy is not really my thing anymore. I used to read a lot of fantasy, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But so I was reading it, and I just I told the author, I really like the premise of her story, but I thought she was trying too hard. And that's what I told her. I said, you're just trying too hard.
Right.
I said, just and don't, you need a certain amount of description, but you have too much description. And, but I didn't say, man, this sucks.
No, they do that. Okay. I do get that point. In the description.
Yeah,
thing,
I always let people know what I like about what they did and what I thought needs improvement. And that's what people do to me.
Yeah.
And, and some people have said, oh, well, this isn't working. And you really ought to think about it, trying it this way or trying it that way. And I'll get all kinds of input, and I really utilize it. I listen to people because, it's true. I don't know everything.
Right. And it takes a healthy ego to take that on. Yeah. That's
and then
great.
when, and the same thing, once I'm finished with a book, then I give it out, advice from Stephen King. Yes. You find maybe 7 to 10 people that you can trust to read this book and give you feedback. And the best piece of advice he gave, he said, if one person complains, you can ignore it. He said, but if you've got like 3 people hitting on the same point, you got a problem, and you got to fix it.
Better look at it.
And so, I do. I look for critiques because I do find that, critiques really make a better writer.
Right.
And I can look back when I first started writing to where I am now, and I'm better now than I was then. So that makes me feel good.
That really helps.
I've written quite a few books.
Oh yeah, I see that. I see that you've contributed or written a bunch of books, and I'll put a link on the podcast page. I've got this thing that's going to go on YouTube, and I've got a podcast aggregator that's going to start posting these. You are actually my inaugural episode that I'm going to post. So that's how new I am. Right now, I've got some tapes and stuff like that. I've been working through the method of how I want to attack this thing, but this is definitely one of the things that drove me forward to getting it on paper, right? To just really actually doing it. So it was. I'm glad I chose this because it's turned out to be a really fun experience reading your book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad. And thank you very much for the review. I really appreciate the review.
Not a problem. There, like I say, it's easy to do something when it's something you really feel that was good to do, and I don't have to make up stuff to try to flatter anybody because I enjoyed the experience of the book. You know, my mom. I just have to circle back on something because it just reminded me of this. So my dad worked for Northwest Airlines, and as a result of that, we got to travel a lot. One of the places we went to was Hawaii. And my mom was so jacked up about that trip, she bought James Michener's book called Hawaii. But we were sitting on Waikiki. I'll never forget. This is like 40 years later. We were sitting on Waikiki, and she finally just threw the book into the tide, and just, oh, the hell with it. And my dad goes, "What's the matter? This is about Hawaii. Here we are in Waikiki Beach. What are you saying?" And she said, "You know what? He spent 30 pages talking about the lava formations that made the island. And I don't want that. So I don't know what that has to do with anything other than it kind of reminds me of my experience with long-windedness versus thriller. That's a real thriller.
Yeah, I prefer concise.
Yeah, I
always have.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I said, he lost your mother.
Right.
Michener lost her. Yes. Okay, because he just went on too long about the lava formations because. Really, it's nice to know how lava was formed, but you can do it in a paragraph.
Yes, exactly.
So
she was just like, "What the hell?"
I know. I there are some books that I've picked up, and it's like, okay, I can't get through this.
Forget it.
And there are other books that they just grab you from the first page. Yeah. There are other books that have not grabbed me, but then I have soldiered through, and so glad that I did.
Okay, right.
One of I'll tell you one of them. It's over 800 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
Taipan by James Clavell.
Okay, Taipan.
And this was, oh my gosh, this was a long, long time ago.
Well, Taipan is Taiwan now, right? Isn't it?
Well, Taipan was the title of like a chieftain, sort of.
Okay.
But he wasn't really a chieftain. Taipan was the head honcho of a big business.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So anyway, I guess I was first married, and my former husband, he started reading this book, and it was like I lost him. He didn't pay attention to me, nothing. His nose was in this book. He couldn't get his nose out of the book. And he said, man, he finished. He said, this is the greatest book. He said, my God, you have to read it. So I started reading it, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's so freaking boring. I can't believe what he told me. So I put it down. It was off-putting to me because just the way the characters were speaking, because this was done like in the 1800s, and I don't know. It just did not resonate with me.
Yeah.
So then our next door neighbors, who we had known, because we first lived in Monterey, California. That's the first time I was ever in California. That's where we got married.
Yes.
But then we went from Monterey. We were sent to Pensacola, Florida. So they moved in right next door to us because he was learning to be a spy. Okay. But then he couldn't pass code, so they shipped my husband off to Vietnam, but that's a whole other story. But at any rate, the people next door, and they were readers too. So her name was Joanne. So she read it, and she's like raving about this book, and I'm thinking, God,
what am I missing?
So I thought, well, I'm going to try and read it again. So I picked it up, and I tried to read it, and I'm thinking, geez Louise, I can't read this book. So then her husband, Dan, reads it, and he's just raving and raving. And I'm thinking, all right. There's something wrong with you, Ann.
This is not me. Right.
So you're going to read this damn book until you figure out what the hell they are raving about. It took me 100 pages.
So you finally
I started reading this book. Well, get this. I started reading this book, all right, at 6 o'clock in the morning because my then husband was going off to code school.
Right.
And he was having a really hard time with it. And so after class, he would stay after school and practice. Didn't do him any good. He just didn't have the ability, and that's why he couldn't pass it. And so they took all the Italian that they'd spent all this money teaching him to work in the Italian embassy and being a spy, and they shipped him off to Vietnam. Anyway.
Yes.
So he would not get home until he'd be gone for like 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I started reading that book at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I did not put it down until I finished it. And it was over 800 pages long.
Wow. And that,
I mean, when I went to the bathroom, I carried the freaking book with my eyes pinned to the page to go into the bathroom. I mean, I was still in my pajamas when I finished the book. Like at 6 o'clock at night, I'm thinking, God, I'm going to take a shower and then get dinner. It'll be here any minute. But it was, it was that kind of book.
That is a very successful book. Well, one of the things I did was I read this book from a perspective of a reader, obviously, but the first time through, I just read it through, and I finished it in 2 settings. And then I went back through it again to just kind of take my notes and for ideas that I was thinking about. And I got to tell you that even the second time through, it flies. It's just so cool. There's so many little things about it that I liked.
Cool.
Yeah, it really is cool. And I hope someday you'd want to come back to talk about the second book that comes out regarding the series, if you enjoy this experience.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. Right.
I got to write it first.
There is that obstacle we have to get past.
Yeah, I know, because I figured I would like to do at least 3 books in the series.
Yeah.
So, and I do know where I want to go with it. I just really don't quite know how I'm going to get there yet. But I never know how I'm going to get, because all of my books are organic.
Right.
They just, they just blossom. And that's just because I go from, I go to point A and then I go to B and then I go to C because it always requires, okay, once you reach the end of C, then you're going, okay, then what is going to come next? And you just sit and you think, okay. And so they just kind of roll themselves out.
Right. Yeah, I think
it's just it's an interesting process. It's an interesting process. Plus, I learn a lot when I write books, just like I do when I read.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to college, I never graduated college. I've got like 2 years of college, and it was very easy for me. I already knew everything they were teaching me.
Right.
I already knew it.
Yeah.
And that's because I read a lot, and most of what I read is fiction. And I don't think people really appreciate how much research a lot of fiction writers, not all, but a lot of fiction writers have to do in order to make a story real.
Right.
Because like in writing The Melt, I did the research. I had to do research into guns because what I know about guns is nothing.
Right.
And yet one of the comments that I got from my writer's class was, wow, you really know your guns. I went, no, I really know my Google.
Yeah, I know my search engine.
That's it, and so but you do, like I learned about these reindeer herders, and I learned about all these different health departments in the United States government. And I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things about viral transmission. It's just, that's what I love. That's what I love about reading. That's what I love about writing, because you learn things. And you're never, ever, ever, ever too old to learn something new and to utilize it in your life.
That's very true. You just keep on evolving. The intellectually curious mind will pick up things along the ride. So that does make the book fun to read. I got to tell you, just going back to your point about this other book that you referred to from the 40s, the Earth Abides. You can tell that, I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know all the things there are to know about guns or anything like that. But certainly you'd need to learn that because we are a gun culture, and that certainly will be around after the virus hits.
Yeah.
So it's a good move to make, and as well as your other choices you made for elements of the book and how, these things will be. There's always going to be those humans. There's going to be a disruptor like who we see. What could possibly go wrong there, I know.
And
there's going to be tribes that'll be going against each other. Within New Hope, there's going to be things that happen between characters that people will find really exciting and really kind of a lot of good tension there in that second part too. Well, and has been no. Go ahead.
No, well, that's what I was aiming for. So I'm glad it all came through.
It did. Well, it has been a pleasure, a really surprise pleasure for me to talk to you today.
Oh well, the pleasure has been all mine.
Oh, that's so fantastic. So how can people find you on the social media?
All right. Well, I guess probably the easiest way is you can go to my website because I've got links to, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And my website is Ann Werner. That's ANNWERNER .info. AnnWerner.info. Mm-hmm. So that'll give everybody a little heads up about, me and who I am and what I've done. And it will also take you, all the books that I've written, and it'll give you all my social media. You can find me on Twitter at Ms. Werner, MSWERNER. And then I think I'm Ann Werner author. I think on Facebook, I can't remember. But if you go to AnnWerner.info, you can find all the links.
That's to link right there. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, and of course, if you buy The Melt by Ann Werner on Amazon, there are my email addresses, all my addresses are in there.
Yep.
Okay, and you can contact me through my website because there's a little contact form. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll answer them.
That's so great. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to speak with me. And what I'll do is I'll send you a link in the next few days of when these things get aggregated and posted, and you can kind of see that. And in my podcast links, I'll put that link into it to make sure people can get to your page from where they're listening to my show.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
Ann,
like a plan.
Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you
coming
for having me. It was all right. Thank you. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Pretty cool, huh? Again, the book is called The Melt by Ann Werner, WERNER. I have links below to her site and links to Amazon to buy the book. So if you like what you saw, hit like and subscribe to the channel as I offer more things like this and other different things too on this channel as I grow it and learn the technology. If you have any helpful suggestions, I'd appreciate it, because I'm just kind of screwing around with all this equipment until I get to know what it sounds like. So thanks again. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.